Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hot Mess Momllennials. I'm Keisha and Shawnee is over
Shawnee.
here. And as you see on kind of the middle of us, we have a lovely guest joining us today. Her name is Bree. She is going to be sharing her story. Now, within her story is going to be some very, potentially triggering, but serious subject matter like spiritual abuse, sexual grooming, and things of that nature. If you are triggered by these subjects, please tread lightly. I do believe that there is a story of triumph, really, to be grasped from this. And if you've been in a situation where you've been, a victim of things like that or spiritual abuse, sexual grooming, anything, I believe that this testimony and this story will be a great way to maybe recognize if it's happening to you, um, or find some sort of peace knowing that you're not alone. So please stay tuned. Bree, thank you so much for being here with us today. As we said before, it's me, I'm Keisha,
And Shawnee.
and we are Hot Mess Momllennials. Hopefully, we won't be too much of a hot mess today because we do have a wonderful guest who is going to be sharing, a very touching and amazing story. Her name is Bree. I'm not going to give it away too much, but what's up, Bree? How you doing today?
What's good? How y'all doing? First and foremost, thank y'all for welcoming me to the podcast. I appreciate it. I'm just happy to be here. Happy to tell my story, especially to you, Keish. I know we've been working on this for a minute, so I'm looking forward to it.
I love you, girl. I'm so happy that you're here. It really does take courage to really be vulnerable in the way that Bree is about to be. But I wanted to just kind of get us into it because I'm sure that you would like to, hear the story. So just some background information on what we're discussing today. Bree and I had not really the pleasure, but we had the opportunity, bad opportunity really, to be a part of an organization called the ICOC, the International Church of Christ, also known as the International Christian Church. This is a church that was established, I believe, in the early 90s. I didn't really go back and really try to get dates, but there's plenty of information on them online. So you feel free to do some research on them on your own. But they are an organization that they are globally, just planted city to city, state to state, country to country, continent to continent, like global, like nothing like it, right? And essentially, they are masquerading as a church. They kind of, act as a church, but do exhibit cult type of, behaviors and qualities. And, Bree and I were both there. I was there since I was 8 years old. I left when I was 31. And, Bree has had her years there as well. So as I said, I think that throughout the duration of the time that we'll be talking and we'll be having this podcast, we'll definitely talk more about our experiences, or, I'll talk more about my experiences. I'm sure Shawnee has some things that she'd like to say, even though she wasn't really in the organization. But nevertheless, one of the main things that I really wanted to make sure that I was speaking on, which doesn't seem to be spoken on enough, is something called spiritual abuse. Right. So spiritual abuse essentially holds you hostage with this idea that you have to adhere to these norms of whatever organization you're a part of, or else your eternity, right? Like your morals, the things that you believe are right and wrong are on the line. Your soul's on the line, right? So you're held hostage thinking, okay, well, I need to do this and this and this. And then in our experience, the Bible was used, right, quite a bit to aid in manipulation and mass control, right? So there are so many people that are still in this organization, and their lives, in their minds are on the line, the lives of their children, and they can't leave, and it would be wrong for them to leave. And if they leave, they are being condemned to hell. They're going to hell because, from this church's, philosophy, there is no other church, right? It's just this church. There's so many things that were normal, right? Like Bree, for example, we weren't able to date anyone that did not attend our body of churches.
Oh, wow.
No matter what, like we're, as you can see, right? Like Bree, myself, we're pretty smart women. You'll probably see that with time. Think a lot. And it's just amazing. It's a testament to how deeply brainwashed you can be. And again, one of these days, like I think that we'll discuss this more. Maybe Bree will come back and we'll discuss kind of like the church culture in general. But the spiritual abuse was very like excellently um, orchestrated, and it just causes people to really lose sight of their feelings and the truth, and even like the truth in what they're reading in the Bible, if that's what they subscribe to after the fact. So there's definitely a great deal of that that's important that we keep in mind when hearing her story. So as far as another really important point, Rolling Stone not too long ago, a few months ago, released an article um, detailing a lawsuit, kind of a string of lawsuits that started in California, I believe, with this organization, essentially accusing them of different counts of sexual assault and conspiracy to cover said assaults in order to make sure their leaders and attendees and people of importance within the church were protected. That really doesn't really have to have anything to do with this story today, but with those lawsuits popping up so recently, I think that Brianna and I can speak for myself. I don't want to speak for you, but I think that we felt emboldened and empowered to really make sure that we are on the right side of this. We have a lot of experience and things to talk about as it pertains to this, and we've seen a lot. And I think that being silent would just be another way that they would win, right? But I think that it's important to just make sure that we're doing the best that we can to make sure that people are aware and hopefully will be protected and won't experience this in their lives since it's so prevalent, right? Um, so I think that's really it for me. It's really how I wanted to introduce this. So anybody have anything else to say before
You
we get
did
started?
amazing. And I am so intrigued. I can't wait to hear about your survival story.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
So happy you're here, girl. So I'm gonna shut up. I might say a little something in between. You know me, I can't stop talking. But without further ado, you guys, I want you to just welcome Bree. She's gonna tell her story. Go ahead, girl.
All righty. Thank y'all for once again making this space for me to keep it, a band with y'all. So this institution that Keisha and I went to, I was introduced to it at like 17 years old. And so I just want to get that little history. So I was there from about 17 to 28, or I think I was going on 27. I was going on 27 or something like that. So almost 10 years. And it's interesting because when I was approached by this institution, I was in a real dark place. I had just lost my best friend 2 years prior. I was just in a murky place. I was trying to figure out God. I was trying to figure out myself. And that's when I was finessed into the game. But I keep it short and I keep it there. I mainly want to focus on what happened the last 2 years, and my whole getting out type situation. So oh Lord. So in 2016, I moved to Texas and I joined their singles ministry. And that's actually where I met Keisha Keish. You know what I'm saying? She's about 4 hours down the road, but that's where I met her in this little singles ministry. And at the time, I was hella excited. I was so excited to understand what it meant to love God as a single woman, to just embrace my purpose, not being married. Because I know, a lot of folks be like, yeah, like, the wife, the kids, the white picket fence. No, baby, I was trying to live like girlfriends. I was trying to live like living. And so I was like, well, better do that. You know what I'm saying? Then with, other like-minded people who love God and trying to be outside. So fast forward, I'm in this singles ministry for maybe like a year or so. And I come across this, guy. Now, mind you, I think I'm like 22 at the time or something like that when I met him. Like 22, 23. And he is, maybe into his 40s. So he's a little grown. And I remember, at the time, our little singles ministry, they had, we were all together. And then at some point they split us, the singles and mature singles. It was weird as hell. But before they split us up, we was all together. So in this time, this guy kept on trying to approach me and, befriend me. Naturally, I'm a guarded person. So every time he was trying to say something, I don't want to say I was evasive, but, it was minimal talk, minimal whatever. And one day he asked me about something at my job, at like an event, because I guess he really wanted to go to it. It was a fancy event. And I think he asked me something else. I start answering a question. He interrupts me and I start going in. I was like, why would you ask me this question? You won't even plan on listening, da 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 da. And then at that time, he was like, well, dang, like, why your wall always up when I'm talking to you? And I was like, oh, shoot. I'm like, this ain't wholly of me, is it? So I'm like, maybe I need to be a little different, So I started to, open up and started to build what I thought was, just like a brother, little sister relationship, even low key father daughter, because he had a daughter that was my age. So boom, we building this friendship, like I said, we, seeing each other, I'm doing this, her, everything like that. We cooling, he's, supporting me financially. Cause at some point, I was between jobs, and things was real cool. But things started to shift. So remember that job event I was telling y'all about that he kept asking me about when we, tapped in that time. He comes to that event and I was with a different date. Like I was with, this younger dude from their little campus ministry, and he was with, one of the other singles. And I remember I had on this blue dress and it was like a little see-through, so the girls was popping out. I had on this wig. I hated the whole outfit.
Killing it.
I am not describing this outfit to gas it. I'm describing it because it's relevant later, because I hated the whole situation, boy. I was so self-conscious. And I remember he looked at me and he was like, we 16 years apart, right?
In his flesh.
And I was like, yeah. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I understand. I was like, what that mean? And it's so crazy because in my mind, I knew like, oh, nah, he on something wild. But the way that this church conditions you, they're like, everybody's safe. These are your brothers and sisters. Trust everybody. So I'm like, clearly he couldn't have meant that like that. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, yeah, we 16 years apart. Like, what that mean? And he was like, I just wanted to mention we 16 years apart. So boom, that was that situation. So then a couple weeks later, we talking some more. And, I sent him this little funny meme where it was like, God said, it was a girl talking to God and she was like, God, I'm the whole package while I'm single. And it was something like, oh, you the whole package. You just get on my nerves or something like that. And it's like, for real. And I was like, dang, I was like, is this what it is? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm like being goofy. I'm like, hey, man, is that me? And he calls me. And I remember I was like on the road, I think back to, my hometown or whatever. And he calls me and he's just like, Bree, you are the whole package, and he starts telling me about how I'm beautiful and how I'm intelligent and how I'm not jaded like the other older women, what I'm saying, in his life. And he was just like, but, I think you could upgrade the package. And I was like, okay, what you mean by that? And he was just like, well, number one, why did you go natural? Now, underneath these little box braids, you know what I'm saying, it's Sabrina. That's my fro. I love her. You know what I'm saying? Me and her been rocking. So I'm like, oh. So I was excited to tell him why I went natural. So I tell him, I went natural. And he's just like, well, I just asked because I knew a girl when I was in my 20s who was natural. And, now we're in our 40s and she's still single. And I was like, is you trying to say the reason why I'm single is because I'm natural? And he knew to walk that statement back, so he started to walk it down. You know what I'm saying? Like a dog. Like, all right. He just like, no, it's nothing like that. I was just saying. And I'm like, okay. So then he started talking to me about makeup. And he was just like, well, do you wear? Like, he was like, could you put on a little makeup? Could you do this? Could you do that? And mind you, I thought it was an odd question, odd type line, line of questioning or whatever. But I'm like, all right, still let it slide. So finally, as Keisha was, mentioning earlier, we ain't really supposed to, or we wasn't supposed to date outside this little institution. So I met a guy near to my workplace or whatever, and he was trying to holler at me. And I was like, nah, bucko, I don't think we on the same page spiritually or whatever. So he was like, okay, where you go to church at? And I was like, oh, this is where I go to church at. So I tell him about the institution. Baby, the next Sunday he was there.
Okay.
So he got the next Sunday, and I'm shook, and everybody like, "Hey, who that fine dude over there?" And I'm like,
Mike.
"That's the dude I was telling y'all about." You know what I'm saying? Like, so I'm like, "Hey, that's him." So I introduced, this guy to, old boy, thinking like, man, they got a lot in common. They grew up in similar areas, had similar careers. You know what I'm saying? At the time, I'm like, maybe they can, link, and old boy could study the Bible with him.
Okay, Bree,
Man,
I'm so sorry to interrupt
yeah.
you right now, but you've said a lot of things, and I'm going to keep it to the end. But I really wanted you to touch on that real quick. I'm not trying to throw you
Oh,
off, but
please, absolutely.
the concept of a guy showing up to church in order to see you and to meet you,
Yep.
for whatever reasons
Lovely.
he had, and your
Yep.
first instinct to run this man to this man. Can you speak a little bit about why that was the normal thing for you to do? Why that would be your first reaction?
Man, it was this weird concept that we was taught. You know what I'm saying? Oh, when somebody comes out to church, especially if it's an unsaved heathen, not that they would use that lingo, but you know what I'm saying, some unchurched fellow, you
Worldly.
supposed to introduce them, right? Worldly, that was the word. Look, I'm so removed. Look, worldly individual pull up. You supposed to introduce them to a godly individual that they can connect with or have something in common with, so they can feel safe, so they can let their guard down, and they can also be, I'm trying not to be mean, but fed the Kool-Aid or whatever, the little spiel. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I guess, the motivation behind me introducing them to.
Right.
Wow.
And like, obviously, and I know that we're going to get into it, we're going to get deeper into it, but clearly for those that are listening to this right now that maybe have not drank the Kool-Aid and can more clearly see than we could have at the time, clearly this probably wasn't the dude, right? Like in any other circumstance to introduce this guy to, if you were going to introduce anybody, right? But I felt like that was important to note. But you're doing great. Keep going.
I appreciate that. So I introduced them to, and I guess, they end up linking once. So, the dude I know, what I'm saying, comes to my house. I'm retwisting his hair. And he was like, you need to be careful around him. And I'm like, okay. And he was like, I would be worried about him if I was you. And I was like, okay. Now, mind you, I'm already knowing this man is chocolate. He got pretty white teeth. He a Q, went to HBCU. I'm already knowing, you know what I'm saying, what I'm up against.
Is he a Q dog? He a Q dog?
That he is the weapon that is formed to prosper. You know what I'm saying? I'm already knowing. So I'm like, so as he's warning me, I'm like, I already knowing, bro. So he just like, no, it's just that you could tell he's the type of guy, that, is not used to hearing no for an answer. And I'm like, right? I'm like, I picked up on that too. Like, I'm not dumb. And then he was just like, it's just that I just feel like your two sinful natures, you know what I'm saying, it might be whatever. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And he was like, it's just that, you have this innocence, and you just, love people or something like that. And then he starts getting into my past. So he was just like, I know you ain't grow up with a dad and you don't really have a lot of family. And then he brought up, like, when I was in between jobs, he's like, you could tell when you were between jobs, if we weren't the ones supporting you, you wouldn't have had anything. He was like, so I just feel like, between that, besides, I'm highly attracted to you.
Wait, I'm sorry.
And
I have a question. You're retwisting the OG from the institution, not the guy you met, the outsider.
Yes.
And okay, I'm tracking. All right.
Gagged. I know. Gagged. Listen, I'm already
the one that you're 16 years. There's a 16-year age difference. Okay. All right.
It's just like, you know how when somebody tries to get to a hard or difficult point that they're trying to make, and then they start saying, well, I had just like, I went to the store today and, I didn't know I was going to go to the store, but I ended up going and, I'm sorry, I had spent $5 I think I might have spent like he went around the world to be like, I just think that you fine, girl.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But let me backtrack a little bit. Let me backtrack. Not that it would be to his credit. He said, and besides, I like you. And then I said, huh? And then that's when he was like, I am highly attracted to you. And I got this pit feeling in my stomach. Like I felt, I can't even describe what happened in my stomach. And I don't even think I recognized what was happening at that moment. But honestly, it was like the shame that was building up from his words. Because I've been in so many positions before where older men have expressed their desire or their intent towards me, you know what I'm saying, growing up, like being hella young, like between the ages of 11 and 13. And it was that same feeling. And I just felt like I wanted to hide. I didn't want to be seen. So, you know, he says this to me and I'm like stunned and I'm shocked and I'm feeling awkward. And I was like, I get awkward and I say, well, I think, you know, you're attractive too, but you have a daughter my age. And, you know what I'm saying? Essentially, this ain't that. And he was like, yeah, you right. And, you know, he was like, well, I just, you know, I hope that this conversation can stay between us because I don't really want your roommate, you know, or your friend in our business. And I was like, okay. And so at that point, I'm sworn to secrecy, not even realizing like this is the finesse, right? But I was going to keep it in anyways because I'm hella embarrassed. So I didn't want to say anything because in my mind, it's my fault. You know what I'm saying? And this is something that I've had to unpack in therapy many, many years. But I was like, I ain't going to say nothing. So I'm thinking, hey, this conversation dead. It ain't going to happen no more.
It never happened.
The gag is, it continued. So it it got as outlandish as, oh boy, he's studying the Bible with, who came out to church for me. We had an event one night and he was acting so controlling, OG from the institution, as you called him, Shawnee. He was acting so down to paying for everything, telling people where to sit, telling us, you know, what to wear. Like, it was wild. Like, he encouraged us to wear heels. Like, he really was moving like a pimp. It was crazy.
Oh my God.
That's neither there. Yes. But, you know, so we at this event and I'm feeling so deeply awkward. Like, I'm not even talking. And I don't know if you can say it, Shani, but I'm a very talkative person. But I wouldn't even talk because I was feeling so uncomfortable.
Awkward.
So finally, yes. So finally we get out in the parking lot and I was just like, what are you doing? Like, you doing too much. Chill. And he was just like, what? I'm doing too much. You doing too much. You already know how I feel about you, what I expressed to you.
It's not like y'all were in a situationship that you didn't agree to.
Bruh, this is what I'm saying. So I'm like, oh my gosh. So boom, shame hitting instantly. So I'm so awkward behind this. So at the end of that night, pretty much he pretty much riled the group up because he got the man to talk about how he voted for Trump. Because Buddy, who was trying to holler, had voted for Trump as a black man who daddy was cooking dope in the kitchen. You know what? I probably shouldn't say that on the podcast.
No, it's in a free space. Yeah.
Right. But listen, but as, you know what I'm saying, as a black man who daddy's cooking up dope in the kitchen, what you mean you voted for Trump? But that's neither here nor there. So he gets the whole table excited and everybody get to leave one by one because they pissed, you know what I'm saying? Because this was a very black, you know, function and we hearing this madness. So everybody except for, you know, me. And then old boy comes up or whatever. Not OG, but the dude who voted for Trump at this point, because now that we got to identify him like that. So we talking and he's just like, hey, dude, are you dating him? And I was like,
it's
no.
giving.
Yeah, that's what it was giving. And he was just like, yeah, he was like, I don't think that dude is who he say he is. And I was like, what you mean by that? And he was just like, but he's like, buddy telling me he been celibate for like 16, 20 years. So I get offended because at the time I was practicing celibacy and I was just like, yeah, me too. So what you trying to say? You know, I'm getting defensive. And he's like, no, Bree. He was like, what I'm trying to say is, I think he is becoming something for the people in this institution. You know, he was like, he could be that dude. He said, or he could be putting on the front for y'all. That's all I'm going to say. Mm. And I, wow. So mind you, once again in that institution, we taught to be defensive of worldly men. So I'm defensive. I'm like, nah, because if OG say he been celibate, he been celibate. He ain't doing nothing. But the whole time, listen, I was the one being fooled. So that night, it was so crazy what began, because he called my roommates and was like, hey, did you see Bree? I just saw her. I just left on the highway. She's still with the dude in the parking lot. I don't know what they
That's
doing.
what they used to do.
So
what?
yeah,
That's what they used to do.
Yeah. So now I get home and folks is questioning me about what I'm doing. So now I'm having to defend my character. So this is how manipulative this individual was. Like, so now you turning my house against me. That's crazy.
You a grown ass woman.
You don't understand.
Yeah.
And they were questioning your move.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
This is for you, Shani, because baby, the fact that you're like so like taken aback by that, it's like, girl, we ain't even got to the tip of the iceberg.
We ain't.
Oh my God. Sorry, I'm just baffled.
You good, Shani? I'm just, listen, what Keisha said though, like this the play stuff. So, but I just wanted to establish just how much control and power this man had. So fast forward, after that, his comments get more and more insidious. He's making comments about my lips. He's making comments about my legs. You know what I'm saying? Yes, like just literally, I remember like I was telling him this dude that who may or may not like me. I was like, oh, I don't think he liked me though, because I'm not his type. He like little skinny girls, da da da. He was like, but they ain't got your lips though. They ain't got them legs though. Like, and he just started making little comments like this, and I'm like,
that's inappropriate.
You know what I'm saying? And then I guess the peak, or where it hit, the peak for me, he went a couple. Sorry, y'all. We were talking about, I guess dress code, because in this community, they was always talking about like how people should dress and, not wearing things to make your brothers or sister stumble. So he was just talking about like how we be dressing as women. And I was like, well, y'all not innocent. I was like, y'all be coming out here in gray joggers. So
that thirst trap, baby.
So
the thirst
you know
trap.
what I'm saying? So I was just, you're right. So don't make it seem like this conversation is one way. What you think he had on 2 days later? What do you think the man had on? So
not the Silver Fox joggers.
Exactly. So Bucko comes out with the, with the gray joggers, and I'm like, that's crazy. So, he kept wanting me to do his hair, and it was so wild because he would have been in my house, but we ended up like being out with, my roommate or whatever, and I did his hair outside in the parking lot. I know, hood as hell, but look,
hey.
follow me. So anyway, so as I'm doing his hair, I'm like, bruh. I'm like, you wild for that. Like, I was like, you need to be fought. And he was just like, what you mean? Like, I was just like, gray joggers, really? And he was like, what? These aren't even gray. These are my what's it called? What's wrong with them? And he just kept prodding and prodding for what is wrong. He was like, do you see something? Like, what do you see? And at the time, I used like appropriate language, and the best that I could come up with is your blessings. I was like, you can see the blessings. And I, once again, not trying to be on this man's body or nothing like that, but I was like, you can see what's happening. You know what I'm saying? And he just like, oh, he was like, well, and it was just like so slick and nasty. He was like, it's so crazy. He was like, because I feel like if you bless, you can't really help it. He was like take you for instance. He was like, I remember at your birthday party, you wore this one black top and you should probably never wear it again. He was just like, I always thought you were like a little person. He was like, but then he was like, at that work function, he was just like, you had on that blue dress. He was like, and you kept moving your hair, in front of your, chest. And I didn't understand why you kept doing it. He was like, at one time, he was like, you forgot to do it. And that's when I saw.
He sounds like a straight up predator.
Bruh, what you said. So what you said though.
Oh my God.
So I'm like, So he says that, and instantly, once again, I'm feeling shame. I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling all types of ways. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just ready to exit the conversation. I think I even apologized to him. I know I apologized to him the next day because I was just so embarrassed, you know? So long story short, he does that, but then he kept sending me videos of, you know, like people, well, not even kept sending me videos. He sent a video of a girl hiding in the closet because her dude had on gray joggers. And Marvin Gaye, Let's Get It On he was like, who this remind you of? So he just kept going. So a couple different things happened. And I feel like I'm telling this story out of order, but I'm gonna just tell you both things at the same time or whatever. So one, I go off on him. And I was like, listen, I don't know what type of time you think this is, but I don't play like that. I was just like, you out here, you send videos, you doing this, you doing that. I don't like that. He tries to turn it and make it into some, like he turned it like he was the victim. And he was just like, I'm sorry. I just feel like, you know, we grew up the same, so I could joke with you like that. And I meant, you know, I can't believe it, because I told him, I was like, man, I'm this close to cussing you out. And he was just like, wow, if you feel like you gotta cuss me out, like we shouldn't be talking, So leave that story there in the box. We'll come back to that. At the same time, I started to think, man, who can I get open with? Because anytime you mention this man's name, people will be like, oh, I love him. He did this for me. He did this for the kids. He did this for the ministry because he was one of their leaders or whatever. So who was I? Where was the space to get open? Who could I be?
Who do I run to?
You know what I'm saying? Exactly what it said. So I'm like, so
sorry.
Look. So I ended up, I think I told my best friend at the time what was happening. And I told one other girl. It was a girl that I remembered that he was kind of being funny with too. So I tell her what happened. And she was like, man, she was like, she was like, you should probably talk to somebody he respect. So I knew it wasn't no leaders, because believe it or not, as he was a leader, he ain't really respect them leaders like that. So I was like, let me talk to his best friend who got some clout in this institution, a little bit more sense. Let me see what can happen. So I go to the best friend. We go out, and, you know, and I'm only mentioning his race because it's relevant to the story, little white dude or whatever. And we sit down eating, and I'm ready to talk to him about his friend. And before I could do that, he was like, let me ask you something. Do you like white guys? And mind you, his friend is about as old or older than him. And I was like, I mean, if they woke, you know, I was like, why? You know what I'm saying? And he was just like, well, I'm from Port Arthur and this, that, and the third. And then he started telling me his run-ins with his almost baby mamas who was black. Like, it was crazy. So I'm like, dang, I can't talk to nobody about this man. This place is not for real. So in the background of all of this, as far as my own mental health, I wasn't doing the hottest. I started to slip to my own dark place. I started to have my night terrors again. Like I started to go to therapy, and I was even scared to tell my therapist about what was happening, because another thing that we taught in this church or this institution is that you can't really talk about it in therapy, because of course folks is gonna be like, get up out that coat, and they know that they're like that. So they're like, you know, don't really, you know, get open like that about what's happening. So I'm low key inching and telling my therapist what's happening. And I remember specifically just mentioning him. And she was just like, this is what's happening in your church? And essentially she's like, why are you there? And here I am defending. But that's neither here nor there. So, you know, for a moment after I went off on him, though, there was some distance. He did, you know, stop doing too much or whatever. You know, we just stopped talking. And the way we end up having to reconvene or come back into each other's lives in 2018 was, I think some of his family members was coming into town. So, you know, we had a policy, not policy, but thing of taking care of people's families or whatever. So we started talking again. But he was still on that same
to take care of people's families.
Yes, girl, listen, it got to be for another podcast, girl. We get here for a whole nother hour talking about the
all right, DJ Kelly.
Yes. So, anywho, so one of the last events that happened before I get publicly open with the leaders. There it was a girl, it was her birthday. So we went out to like this, Jamaican club, in the city or whatever.
Duh to you.
He comes in. What'd you say?
I said duh to you.
Yeah, okay. Listen, you know they're my people. People.
I know.
So anyway, so we go to this Jamaican club, and he brings his brother. Now his brother, he had been trying to hook us up. Now mind you, his brother is worldly by them church standards, but he just felt like we needed to be together. And in his mind, I remember him being like, I told my brother about you. I showed my brother you, and he was like, "Who is this little pretty chocolate thing?" And I'm like, "Your brother is not talking like no old uncle. Like that's talk. I know your brother not talking like that, but whatever. This is what he said." Brother say about me, and I'm like, okay. And he had this thing where he felt like women would bring out men to this particular institution. So like I said, really, really on his pimping hoe status, really in his pimping bag. So
to convert. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, exactly. Or to convert. That was like that, baby. And so he was just like, man, I want you to meet my brother. So we all get out this one night, and I think they had been drinking. And so he keeps on whispering in my ear. Crazy part about this story is he was doing this with 3 women that night, which we'll get into once we talk about, openness with leaders. So first time he calls me over there, he's like, "I respect you so much." And I'm like, okay. So I walk away, doing my thing. He calls me over there again. I don't remember what he said that time. He calls me over the 3rd time, and he says, "You're going to be in my family one way or another."
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, my God. That's so, wow. Aggressive.
Yeah. So I'm like, yo, this is crazy. So, boom, so that was that night. Then the final situation or the final straw was, man, I was out with my roommate, and I had no idea he was coming. Out with my roommate, she invites him out. Mind you, I'm not telling the people close to me what's going on. Outside of a best friend and the girl I know who is involved, and maybe people outside of the situation, nobody in my circle knew the fullness of what was happening. You know what I'm saying? And I'm talking my circle in the city. Because Keish, I think you knew what was going on. I think I would tell you bits and pieces. But like, nobody really knew, especially not my roommate. So she invites him out.
Question.
Like,
was your roommate also a part of the institution?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they was all. So
we couldn't live with people outside of the institution.
What?
Yes. I'm just let that sink in.
People would try to. Just a quick tangent, just so that you kind of get more of an understanding. I've been a part, and I'll talk about that, but I've been a part of situations where we're trying to baptize. Baptizing people essentially is how you're initiated into the institution, since that's what we're calling it. I've been a part of situations where I was trying to baptize someone that we were, trying to initiate. And they were, boyfriend and girlfriend. It'd be like a guy and a girl. Mm-hmm. And we would essentially be like, you are going to risk your eternity if you continue to live together. So you need to get married at this church. And people really did it all the time. And it was just the normal thing for us. Like, we just felt like, okay, it's better to do this. You're together anyway, so you might as well get married so you don't go to hell, like, just so that you're fine. You can't be equally yoked to unbelievers. That concept spread throughout every facet.
Oh, wow.
You can't live with your homegirl because y'all clearly, anything can happen. You can't even be around a member of the opposite sex for too long past a certain hour. I think it was like 10 o'clock was like the latest. Like, they was like an actual like a rule.
Not by yourself.
Right.
Oh.
Because I remember one time we had this sermon, and it was actually something that was mentioned. It became like a jargon, like a one-liner in our church afterwards. But this female leader, she told us a story about how one time she was like, I guess, thinking about rooming with a guy, and she was still new in her walk with God, aka being at this institution. And she was like, you know what? People can't tell. She was told, like, she was being told by the other women, the sisters in the institution, that she needed to, not live with a guy. And she was like, well, I thought we were friends. I thought we were great. Like I didn't have any problems with him. I didn't want him. And then and then all of a sudden she was brainwashed. And all of a sudden one day she said that she was sitting or standing somewhere and she heard God's voice loud in her ear say, not even a hint of sexual immorality. And basically in reference to the scripture that says you should not have not even a hint of sexual impurity or immorality, or else you will not inherit the kingdom of God. Like she would like reverberate that message for like months and months to come. And that would be like, okay, I've noticed you've been hanging out with the guys a lot. You know what I'm saying? But let's not forget, we don't want not even a hint. Even if you're not even thinking about sex, there is that dynamic that's just going to automatically exist if you are around someone from the opposite sex under these random circumstances that I guess incite sexual needs. Like, it's just like, y'all could go out to eat, but there has to be another couple with y'all.
So like a chaperone.
Yes, at all times. And it had to be someone that reported to leadership. It just had to be. Reported. Of course, it wasn't said that way, but essentially that's what it was. That's what those studies were, essentially.
This is sounding like Scientology too.
Girl. And
the
ICOC is like the more prevalent but less known cousin. I'm like, how do y'all get away with this, child? Like, how?
Y'all are blowing my mind.
Yeah. I felt like that was important. There's a lot of things that I want to bring up from everything you've said, because I just really want to make sure that we clarify, but that was our little tangent, just so that people can really understand some of the dynamics if they don't get it, because they weren't there. But, okay, Bree, go ahead, girl.
Understood. So I'm out with my roommate and she invites him out. And it was so busy. So we go out, and I remember I was feeling so awkward. But mind you, I couldn't really tell my roommate the full scope of what was happening. So we go out or whatever. I think that night ends at probably like 3 a.m. We was out super late. I don't even know why we was out that late. So I try to get back into my house. Oh, I forgot to mention, at this time, my roommate leaves my place. So she lives somewhere else at this time. I don't know why I'm still calling her my so she lives all the way across town. He lives by me, and then I go home. So I go home. Can I get in? Because the roommate that stayed was, I'm gonna just say, she was in a situation and the doors was locked. You know what I'm saying? I'm not doing anything wrong, but she has she needed some extra protection. So I couldn't get in the house. So I called them, and long story short, old boy was like, well, I'm not gonna be, home, because he worked overnights. Like, so he did. He was never at home or whatever. So out of foolishness and desperation, I go over there. And, but I'm asking him, I'm like, what time do you get back? Because I'm like, whatever time you get back, I need to be up out of here. And he wouldn't tell me what time he got home.
It's a surprise.
So he just left his weapon. And he was like, if anybody try to come in, you know what I'm saying, this is what you need to do. You know what I'm saying? Or, you got this. But he was like, I'll be back. And I'm like, what time? Never told me the time. So I fall asleep. And I wake up to like knocking on the door. And I'm like, what's going on? So it's him. I open the door. I'm kind of delirious. I'm trying to get myself together. And all of a sudden, he goes in the back, and I hear water running. And I don't know why that triggered me so bad. I don't know what was happening in my mind. I don't know if in my mind he was getting naked and he was going to do something else hella slick. But I ran. Like, I ran so fast. I dipped out of that place. I sped home. And at this point, you know what I'm saying, my other roommate was awake, or this roommate was awake, and I was able to get home. So from that point, it was just too heavy. Mm-hmm. So I was like, man, the band. So I tell, one of me and Keisha's mutual friends, which is so crazy that she ain't 10 toes no more. She was so 10 toes before. Mm-hmm. Okay, you know what? Edit this, because I ain't even mean to throw that much shade. But anyway,
Leave it in.
I tell, I tell one of me and Keisha's mutuals, you know what I'm saying, everything that happened. And she encourages me to go to leadership. So I had the ideal. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take the first girl with me, because the first girl, I'm going to just say she was a little bit more connected within their institution. So I was like, even if they don't believe my black face, my black voice, because they don't love, they don't like to believe black.
No, they don't.
So I was like, let me bring her, So I come to her. I tell her what happened. She shook, and she's like, I'm coming with you. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm crying because I didn't even anticipate like her, her willingness to come with me. Mm. So she comes with me. I'm getting ready for that day or whatever, because I think we end up scheduling a meeting maybe a week or two out or something like that, maybe a week. And that morning I was getting with another girl, and she just left a campus ministry. So she real young too. I just left a campus ministry. I'm getting with her, and I'm the type of person, when I feel something, it's going to be all over my face. You're going to know what it is. So she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, girl, I'm about to get with these leaders and tell them about this little crusty dude who been trying it. You talking about so-and-so? And she names him. And I'm like, yeah. Sorry, y'all, if I get emotional at this part, because this part, it just...
You got to let it out.
She like, yeah. So she like, is you talking about him? And I'm like, yeah. And she was just like, shoot.
You good, sis.
Yeah. So then she tells me, he had been trying it with her. And she starts telling me what was going on, and how essentially like that was the reason why she didn't really feel safe merging into the singles ministry. And it was at that moment, it just hit me how much my silence has afforded this man. And I think that's what messed me up about it. And even with, and we'll get to that part later, even with like the Rolling Stone article and, just seeing these women come out after all this time, and I'm proud of them and I'm proud of their strength. But it's just like, man, like how much has our silence afforded people to move like this? So it broke me that day. So baby, I don't know what I planned on saying when I was going to meet with them leaders. But at that point, she put the fire behind me, because I was like, you telling me it's the third girl? And these are only the girls I know about, So anyways, me and old girl, we get with leadership. So we didn't get with the main leaders, but I guess the second in command leaders or something like that. Black couple. And, we keep it a band with them. So she tells her story first, which her story and, her story and my story to tell, but it was more like it was a lot of emotional and spiritual abuse with her. Mine, it was all of that. And then it had the sexual element. So she tells her story. I tell my story. We crying at the end. They crying. And they're like, what can we do? Oh my gosh, this is devastating. He's a predator. He's this, he's that. So you really think, they got your back. Mm-hmm. And looking at each other and looking at them, we like, we don't know. Like, and they was just like, oh, well, they was like, well, you know what? How about, we make sure that he doesn't contact y'all. So that was like their first line. They was like, we're going to talk to him, but we're going to make sure he don't contact y'all. So I didn't think too much into it. We was like, all right, cool. So I guess the story was so disturbing for them, they bring the elders into it. Because I guess they was trying to figure out what action they was going to take. Like if they was going to disfellowship him or what, you know what I'm saying? Which disfellowshipping is, y'all probably know what it means, but I'm going to just say it for the podcast. This is when they determine that somebody is unfit for membership because of how they moving. They'll probably, have you stand up and announce your sins in front of the congregation. But if it get too deep, then they just going to get up out of there. Yeah, real wild. So they bring the elders into it. Which let me say this. I think the most disappointing part of my story is a lot. It's a lot. But the fact that I had two Black women looking me in my face and playing my story down and playing with me in my face actively, So we'll get to that. So boom, second meeting is just the elder's wife and the leader's wife, and then me and old girl. The third girl, she opted not to be there, but she told me I could tell her story to them. So they pull up, and like I said, they let my friend get her story out, and with interruption. And then I start telling my story, and the elder's wife is interrupting me, baby. She's just like, what? What? This happened? Oh my gosh. And what did you do? Oh, when did you say something? Did you try to get open? And I was like, actually, I did. I got open with the person in the room, and then she told me to say this to old boy. I said something to your mans, and then he tried to holler. So as I was saying, so then I continue my story. Stop playing with me. So anyway, so we get all the way to the end. Do you know? She's like, oh, I think she tried to feign some empathy, like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. She's like, but we need to talk about boundaries, and we need to talk about, this, and, making sure. So as she's saying this, she then tells her own story of assault. And so she's telling her story of assault that happened to her. You know what I'm saying? And
in
she's
this
like,
institution?
In this institution. And she was like, and you know what I did when I saw him? I just prayed. And I literally remember I was shaking my head no, because I was like, we ain't on that. We not on that. We are not the same. I'm not finna just pray every time I see this man. First of all, I'm feeling threatened. And now that the story is out here, like, I'm the type of person, when I feel threatened, we gonna do something about it. So I'm really ready to come to church strapped. Like, so what do you mean? Like, we finna just pray about it every time we see him. And so I'm shaking my head no as she telling her story. And then I think at some point I asked, I was like, did you call the police? And she was like, no. She was like, but I told everybody. So I guess that's what she wanted to, she felt so impressed by. She was just like, as soon as he did what he did, I told everyone. And I told him, I was telling his roommates, I was telling the church leaders, I was telling these people, and I told.
Okay. So there was no worldly accountability.
Exactly. So anyway, so I'm like, oh, that's wild. So at the end, they was like, well, what do you want? And it was so crazy because I was speaking for my friend. I said, well, we don't want to see him. I was like, can you move him around or something like that? Because he was still coming to the church every Sunday. So imagine, getting real about, about your whatever. And then you got to see this person every Sunday. I'm like, we don't want to see him. And she's like, well, you can go to a different region.
Wait a minute. You have to go because he was being inappropriate? Y'all couldn't exile him because of his behavior?
Listen, they said I could go to a different region. And so at this time, it was so crazy because I had just been in a car accident. Somebody hit me, totaled my car. And so I didn't even have a vehicle. And my city, it was pretty big. So what you mean? Like, it's not a hop, skip, and jump away. So anyways, I was like, you go to a different region. So I'm like, well, why can't he go to a different region? I asked. And they was like, well, we don't want the same thing happening in this other region. So I guess they felt like as long as we got eyes on him, we were able to see. Wow. So I'm like, okay. So that whole conversation ends. I feel awful about it. So my homegirl, she's still trying to be optimistic, but I'm feeling a lot, as these conversations are progressing. So they tell me, quote by quote, they say, I'm going to tell my husband, or we're going to tell our husbands exactly what you told us, and we're going to have them get together. So at this time, they get with this guy, and he is very charismatic. How do you think he made it so far in this institution? So meet number 3, we meet with the eldest husband. And he looking in our faces, talking about some, I talk to him, and it's really hard, when you're trying to be a big brother to somebody, it could come off a certain way. I'm in school right now. I think he was studying education or something. He was just like, and I'm learning about the stages of grooming. And my wife said he's a predator, but I'm not really seeing any signs of grooming. So mind you, my friend, she is a warrior. She's spicy, but like, she was keeping it cute in these meetings. But maybe that meeting, she stopped keeping it cute. She said, what you mean? You know what I'm saying? We're not talking about a predator. She was like, this is somebody who did this, and that to me. So she started talking about what he did. And I said, yeah, you talking about somebody who was staring at my breast in a dress. And the husband, he starts convulsing. He's like, oh my gosh, she was doing what? My wife didn't tell me that. And I was like, yeah, she said she was going to tell you. Now, mind you, I'm so candid because she said, I'm going to share the notes from this meeting with this man. So I guess he said something to the wife. She got up in her chest about it. So they was like, we calling a meeting. And they was like, we want to just meet with you. And so they asked my friend not to come. The friend I have been, telling this story with this entire time. They tell her to sit out because they just wanted to meet with me. They come through and meet with me. And baby, the eldest wife was like, what did you say to my husband? And I was like, the same thing I said to you. And I wasn't trying to be funny, but it was genuinely the same thing I said to her. I was like, the same thing I said to you. She was like, no, what did you say? I was like, I literally told him what I told you. She was like, because the other woman was like, the leader's wife, she was like, do you know why we here? And I was like, I mean, I'm not sure, but maybe around it. She's like, yeah, what did you tell her husband? And so then I'm like, well, let me get specific. So I tell this very awkward story all over again about the portion that I just told y'all earlier. So I have to tell it again. Whew. So I tell the story again, and the leader's wife is like, well, did he say he was looking at your breast? She was like, because what I gathered from the story was that he was looking at your frame. And we want to be very careful about the language that we use, when we're talking about these things and this, that, and the third. So at that point, they then start to tell me warnings. And so that was a thing in this church. They would warn you, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes you're publicly warned. Sometimes, you're privately warned. So they say, we want to warn you against these sins. They was like, we understand what you went through is traumatic. But we want to warn you against gossip. We want to warn you against lies. We want to warn you against this. We want to warn you against that. And I'm sitting here like, am I really getting warned? This crazy. So, after they get done running down this list of what they want to warn me against, I'm like, all right. So I look at them and I was like, all right, then. Like, because at this point I checked out. So I ain't even going to mention, the end. Because I just check out. And the eldest wife was like, I want to meet with you one more time.
No, ma'am.
Yep. Listen, one more time. And this was the last meeting. She's like, I want to meet with you one more time. And I'm like, all right. She was like, and I want to work on this ideal of forgiveness. And I was like, oh, okay. So she sits with me one more time. And it's just me and her. And she starts telling me about her upbringing. And I don't know why she thought we could relate, but we couldn't. She was telling me about her household, her single parent household, and, the situation she'd been through. Because I, care about Black women, even though this one was raggedy. I won't put her business out there. But she tells me all these stories and was like, you see, we're the same, right? And all I could muster out was, if you say so. Or I was like, if you think so, or something like that. And that was the end. So at that point, I knew it was time to skedaddle. But it took me an additional 2 years to get up out that mug. And it's so crazy because it wasn't even just my situation that made me get up out of there. It was another case of somebody being creepy in a whole nother city. And I was like, yeah, see, because no. And I ended up dipping like May of 2020. But that's what happened.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, thank you for sharing. That was a lot to unpack. I have questions.
Okay.
Oh, of course.
Go ahead, girl.
So when you did leave, have you followed up in regards to is this individual still there?
He was still there for a while. As of this year, I haven't asked any questions or followed up. But I thought it was interesting because when my story did come out to the masses and stuff like that, and my roommates found out, one of my roommates was one of his best friends. She actually ended up leaving the institution, and she was like, not that I didn't believe you at the time. She was like, but after you left, let's just say some stuff popped off.
Dang.
She was just like, I was like, wow. So he was still there. So I don't know. He probably still is.
And with you leaving, like what like pushes you every day to be like, you know what? I did what I needed to do and I'm continuing to do what I need to do and spreading this. What is the fuel for you to press forward and share your story, because that's a difficult story to share.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that. I think for me, my fuel came, and it's so crazy because I know it was late, but just hearing and seeing other women experiencing this. And I remember I told this elder, and that's the part I forgot to mention in my meeting number 3. I told him, I was like, how we handle this situation sets a precedent for how you feel about women in this institution, and it determines what must be here. And I was like, and that's not a threat. Like, because, some people are like, I'm going to leave if you don't. I'm like, no, it's not that, but it's going to let me know how you feel about women. So I think understanding that no matter what, the man is going to be protected, and also seeing other people hurt by this institution in these ways, whether it is sexual harassment, assault, different types of abuses or whatever, I think that's what gives me the conviction not only to stay away, but tell my story too.
And that's powerful. And props to you. Say 10 toes down, because, hey, somebody there has to hear the story, because they probably have that feeling in their tummy that, hey, something ain't right. But somebody else they're sharing that. So confirmation. This will be confirmation for them.
That's so real.
Okay, Bree, I have some questions too. I'll try not to make this too long, because I think we were here longer than we anticipated. But I guess this is a difficult question, and if I'm kind of off base, then just let me know if I'm just pulling something out of my ass. So what I listened to whenever you were discussing the way that you felt intuitively was almost like, different from the way that just from the rules of the institution. It was different from what you thought you should feel, or it was different from what was being presented to you based off that institution, meaning that it didn't seem inherently sexual by nature, because he's a man and he's your big bro, and he's supposed to be a shepherd. He's supposed to be someone you can get advice from. Did you feel like, I don't know, like consciously at any time, like this man really wanted you, especially in the beginning? I know that things clearly unraveled, towards the middle end, but did you feel whenever you first started, having these moments with him, that he wanted you or liked you or had a crush on you, or was attracted to you, like in your conscious mind? Or did you just feel kind of uncomfortable while being oblivious?
I think I knew the truth,
Mm-hmm.
I knew what was up. It's hard to say in my conscious mind, because I'm like, man, if I knew it in my conscious mind, then wouldn't I have operated in XYZ fashion? But something in the back of my mind knew, like, oh, I think he is attracted to you, da da da, especially after the job situation. I'm like, that comment linked, and I was like, man, if I needed any confirmation or whatever, this is that. So I knew.
So with that knowledge, like, I guess this might be difficult, but I feel like I might know the answer. But what prevented you at the beginning from feeling like you could say something about this?
I think, and this transcends that, institution or whatever, because I've been in relationships like this too. I think, like rusty men, like, try to gaslight you out your experience. And I think because I experienced so much complex trauma, throughout my life, even before I hit this institution, it's easy for me to believe that I'm thinking from a lens or a perspective of my trauma, and not from what's happening in my reality. So I think it's that, that in addition to this brainwashing of everybody's safe and this is your brother, that those couple of things stopped me.
Yeah.
Do you think also just like not wanting to rock the boat?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I thought, yes, I thought about that often. I thought about, man, what is it going to be like when I name this man? When I say, what's going to happen to the singles ministry? What's going to happen to different dynamics? Absolutely.
Yeah. And honestly, there is something to be said for the fact that he did know about your past. right?
Mhm.
And
Predator.
I don't want to ask those questions and not be responsible enough to just continue to highlight the fact that there are rules and there are, tricks, I guess if you will say, of manipulation, and kind of this hopelessness that gets put on you, it's put on us, especially the women in that institution, that
Yeah.
make you feel like your words, your actions are like invalid, like you probably are imagining it. You don't know what the
Yep.
brothers or the men are going through, right?
Yep.
So you're kind of in this place where, okay, you have to police yourself. Don't wear certain clothes. Don't do this. Don't do that.
Yep.
Even the detail
Yeah.
of you having your hair over your chest because it was a fear that you had that you were some nasty, potentially dirty thing that would hurt this man or hurt men because that's what we're
Yeah.
taught. But thank you for answering that question. I feel like it's important that it's nuanced and that we understand fully kind of the work that was being done in order to assume that power. Um,
Important.
I think I have a simpler question. What has your recovery looked like since leaving that institution?
Ooh, man, it has been a beautiful and hard journey. Number one, it has looked like reading and unpacking everything I thought Christianity, religion, or my connection with my Creator looks like.
Mm-hmm.
It has looked like staying away from church. It's so wild because when I first left, I was like, oh, let me find another church home because even that was conditioning. If I'm not going to church every Sunday, I'm not righteous before God. But it has looked like not going to church. It has looked like intentionally breaking the rules. It has looked like breaking down, crying, and being afraid, and being confused in my own walk. It has looked like, and I told you this before, like fear of opening my Bible, fear of praying because I don't know what to say sometimes. Um, it's looked like a lot, but today, you know what I'm saying? I feel like I'm coming into what not religion, but what spirituality is for me. And I recognize that from an early on, maybe my grandma was on to something. I don't think it was ever supposed to be this. I think it was supposed to be finding our own path that don't look like one thing, especially the ICOC.
Building a relationship, an individual relationship.
Yes. So that's what it's.
I think I have one more question. I don't know if Shani has any more.
I don't.
So why don't you look into the camera? And if you could, what is one thing that you would say to that community as you're in your recovery now? This doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't have to be to anyone that's wronged you. It could be to the person that's there that might be going through this, but it's all up to you. Is there anything that you would say?
Okay. Whew. I would urge the people who are there at this moment to listen to your body because your body is not lying to you. Those thoughts that keep you up at night, they are not lying to you. They are not from Satan. They are not doubts in your faith. They're doubts about where you are right now. Please listen. That's about the classiest thing I got to say.
We'll come back another time for the unclassed things. You are so amazing and you are brave, Bree, because this is not an easy story to tell. There are people in this world that will still judge you for this story and will probably judge the other people that have experienced this. But you have made a stand today by sharing your story and going against the grain and really showing that strength and that recovery that you've experienced that you're going through. And I am so honored that you chose to come here with this way better setup than we had the last time to not only tell this story, with your face shown, your beautiful face, but to tell it again. Because I don't know if people know this, but we tried to do this about a year and a half ago. But things just weren't, the stars just didn't align. But everything has its timing and its purpose. And I am so excited and honored about just this bravery and courage and this strength and your honesty and how this is going to impact people that are in a corner somewhere thinking that they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you and I thank you so much.
This was so enlightening, motivating, and encouraging to like step out and do what you feel that you need to do, regardless of whatever anybody else is thinking. Like, you need to do you. And I'm so proud of you. I know we just met today, but I am so proud of you. It takes a very brave individual to do that, you know, because it's easy to just go with the flow, not want to rock the boat. But you have to be uncomfortable to get comfortable.
I know that's right.
So props to you, sis, doing it.
Thank y'all kindly. Thank y'all both for just, having me here today. But really, Keisha, I know I said this to you before, but I really want you to hold on to this. You have my deepest, deepest gratitude, okay? Because you believed me the first time. And you have no idea how much that has carried me. Yeah. Thank you.
It's my honor that you would share it with me, baby. I understand. I do. And I'm so proud of you still for continuing to tell your story.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. Well, this has been very powerful. And again, I hope that this does touch people that don't even know that they're going through anything. Let this be that alarm that goes off inside of you that causes you to make a change if you need to.
That conviction.
Yes. All right, you guys. I think this is it. We're out. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
See me at our spot.